What's going on, everyone? We are back for another episode of the Pair Program. I am your host, Tim Winkler, accompanied by my co-host, Mike Gruen. Mike, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's Friday.
Yeah, exactly.
Complain. Cool. Want to talk today about this concept of getting layered. So, what is layering? It's a situation where you've been an employee at a startup for a certain amount of time, and the leadership decides to hire someone above you. So a common scenario. We've got some great guests here today to shed some light on the topic. They've seen this situation play out from a few different perspectives. So, Sean and Kim, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, welcome.
Cool. All right. So before we dive into the discussion, in the Pair Program tradition, we like to kick things off with a fun segment called Pair Me Up.
Pair me up.
This is a segment where we go around the room. We shout out a complimentary pairing. So, Mike, lead us off for today.
So I'm going with cheesecake and habanero peppers. Nice layer of hot peppers on top of the cheesecake. It's really hits the spot. I love it. It's the sweet and the spicy, and then the fat from the cheesecake really helps bring it all together.
How did you come across that? I'm just curious. Was it served at a...
Yeah, it was served. So second job I was at, the CEO for his birthday forced everyone to have a piece of his cheesecake that he put these habanero peppers all over. Like, it was covered. You couldn't see the top of the cheesecake. It was just these slices of pepper. And he basically forced it all on us. And I like spicy stuff anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal. And I tried it. I was like, this is amazing. I'm glad you made me eat this. And so that's how I fell in love with it.
I gotta experiment with that. Sounds like a heartburn nightmare.
The fat from the cheesecake kind of helps a little bit with that.
Smooths it out, evens it out. Nice. Cool. I'm gonna go with everything bagels and toothpicks. For the most part, I have never, in all my years, eaten an everything bagel without just getting poppy seeds in all different crevices of my teeth. And of course, this morning had a call with my CFO. We're doing the Zoom, and then we wrap up. I go look in the mirror, and I've got like 6 poppy seeds all up in my teeth. And I'm like, I think this needs to be standard. Anytime you get served like an everything bagel, it just comes with a toothpick or a dental pick, something like that, because the problem's real. So, Kim, what about yourself? What's your pairing?
Oh, so I'm going something totally non-food related. I'm going to go with first day of PTO or first day of vacation and direct deposits. I think that's like when you are out, like you're in Spain, you're in Las Ramblas, and you want to buy like these expensive cheeses, and you're like, I should think I have enough. And then like you see that direct deposit hit, you're like, oh snap, I can you know what? Wrap up that whole roll of manchego. I am taking it back to my hotel room, and I'm just going to chill and eat it. That
nice
is beautiful.
Take the whole wheel.
Take the whole wheel. That's what I'm bringing back.
I like that.
That's nice.
I like that. Sean, how about yourself? What do you got?
I tried thinking of something not food related, but failed. I'm going to have to go with salt and vinegar. Not so much for the chips, because any condiment worth eating has salt and vinegar in it. Like hot sauce, it's like, oh, you got your jalapeno and salt and vinegar. Your habanero, salt and vinegar. If it doesn't have salt and vinegar in a condiment, why bother?
It's good.
It's legit.
I'm obsessed with salt and vinegar chips. I mean, that's the GOAT chip in my opinion.
You start there and then maybe think about something else to go with it.
That's right. Good stuff. Well, all right, let's go ahead and wrap this up and transition into the heart of the discussion here today.
Let's dive in.
As I mentioned, we are going to be talking about this concept of getting layered, and we strategically selected, our 2 guests today as they have each seen this layering play out from different perspectives. For example, Kim, you've been in a role in the past where you were the one getting layered. Sean, you've been layered before, but you've also sat in like a manager seat of the one who's doing the layering. And then there's also this third perspective that we'll dissect as well, which is a little bit more of like the perspective of the new hire that's being brought into the company and how that person might navigate the situation with the person that they maybe just hopped over on the totem pole. So I'm going to start it off with you, Kim, and I think it'll be helpful to get provide some context for our listeners here. What has been your experience with layering?
My experience has always been I'm hiring. It's one of two things. It's one, I'm hiring for my new boss. There's lots of nuances in there, but at least like, hey, we're going to bring a VP in. This person is going to report to you, or you're going to report to them. Let's just see if they fit. And then the other part is me. Like they want to put me not just like in a new cake, but like a new like pastry display. I guess that's the best way to think about it. Yeah. Cool.
And I might have skipped over this, but just a quick intro, I guess, on your title as well, like the roles that you've served in the past.
So I've gone, full stack dev, regular coding monkey, to then moving into like team lead, tech lead, subject matter expert, and then gradually moving into like project lead or PM, and now I'm officially into the engineering manager role, the EM role. And then there's this thing of like, well, we kind of want you to move into the project management again because you're really good at it. And I'm like, okay, I guess. Why not?
Sean, what about yourself? Quick intro on a little bit of how you've progressed to your current situation, and then your experience with layering.
Yeah, so my experience has been coming from being like a junior dev, coming up the ranks, having people sometimes come in above as that progresses, moving into engineering manager role, heading up an engineering team, and then also kind of fit within another engineering team, even in my current role, where not that long ago I was a CTO and a couple of devs, and now the team's growing and layers are getting introduced throughout all of this. So,
and what's the size of the startup that you're currently working for?
The engineering team is about 27 right now.
And total headcount?
Total headcount is around 280.
Okay, cool. Mike, you've also got some experience with this topic, so I'm curious to hear your story.
I think I'm trying to think. I've definitely been the person coming in, like where they sort of have an engineering team, there's a senior engineer, and they have decided to hire a VP of engineering and been that guy coming in. And also definitely not so much in the layering as much as like I was transitioning out of the company and moved into a product role to make room for a new VP of engineering and sort of brought somebody in. But it's a very similar sort of process of here's a new boss and we're not promoting from within. It's not so much layering as much as just like, I don't know, just this replacement, but and how does that all work? But those are my primary experiences.
Cool. So Kim, I like this analogy that you use about like almost like looking at it as like layering a cake. So what are I guess some advice or recommendations for tech leaders out there that are getting ready to do some layering, like how to best practices? Anything out there that you that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is about just the interview cycle and deciding who should be a part of it. I find it kind of curious that oftentimes when you're trying to layer somebody in, especially somebody who's going to have reports, that the people who will report to them aren't included in the interview process. I find that so fascinating. I think because I came from education when I was a teacher, and it was super common, at least at the last school I was at, where the students would actually ask questions to the incoming candidate, like, what do you, just things like, what do you see? What do you see in our neighborhood? Stuff like that. And so I'm asking myself, like, why don't we include the folks who are going to eventually report to this person? Because it not only number one, you can figure out if they're a culture fit, but two, you are ensuring that your engineers are going to probably stay in the company because they feel included. One thing to say, I want to include your ideas and we want to move to serverless, but it's another thing to say, I really want your opinion on a very big decision at the company, and it matters. And I just find it so fascinating that oftentimes they don't include it. It'll just be peer interviews as opposed to reports. And then I think the second thing is, and sometimes it doesn't work where the candidate who the people, the peasants want or whatever, is what, a C-level person wants. And it's really important to be transparent, to say, this is why I chose this individual over what you said, and to be ready for any pushback that might happen as a result of it.
I think it's interesting you bring up the include the reports, because I think that there's two parts to that. Because if you're going to include them, which I, like you, believe you should, then you also have to listen to them. Because I think what I've definitely seen this at other organizations where they're included, but it's clear their opinion doesn't matter, that they're just right. And so if you're going to include them, then their opinion also has to matter. Otherwise, you're better off actually saying, hey, we're doing the search. We know what we're looking for. And we hope that you like this person. We hope that blah, blah, blah. But like, we know what we're looking for. It's I think the worst is to include people and then sort of not really care about their opinion.
I even think I'd take that even a step farther and saying like, oh, we're looking for someone that has these qualifications, but then the report should actually be weighing in what do they need for someone, right, and actually weighing even a step more of like, this is what they want in a candidate, and bringing those two worlds together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like what are the things that we think we need? Like who better? I agree. I mean, I'm all about, I would go beyond empowering people to this concept of like emancipation, where it's like, they're free. I want my engineers to just be able to do, and I don't want a manager that's, I'm not very top down. And so, yes, I would love nothing more than like their participation. What's interesting though, is when I hired my replacement at a company, the engineers weren't actually that involved. The people that this person was going to be reporting to, but here's the thing. He was an internal referral from a couple of the people who had worked with him previously, a couple of the very senior engineers who had worked with him previously. And we just knew that he was going to fit, and it worked out great. Like we knew that it was going to be good, and it did. So we couldn't have, like, the idea of having all of these people interview him seemed sort of almost pointless because we just had such a good feel for him. But it is funny that I say that, but that's the way it worked out, and it worked out really well. And some people who reported to him were like, hey, he's actually a better manager than you, Mike. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a good perspective too, and I would almost go as far as saying too, like the candidate that you're bringing in, that you're interviewing, like that you almost want them to push for that. Like, hey, can I meet the folks that are going to be, if it's not a part of the process, like bring it up and say, would it be okay if I talk with some of the folks that would be on my team?
I've done that, and the recruiter had been like, oh, we never thought about that. And I was like, that's why you want to hire me, because I'm going to bring this.
No, I totally agree. Right. I've definitely pushed for the meeting with the people who are going to be reporting to me. I want to know what the real problems are. And like, this is like, and they're the ones who are going to tell you.
Mm-hmm. What about from the perspective of, the person that's getting layered, right? When is that something that maybe when's the right time to bring it up, to address it? And even so, like I can even trace this back to like, when you're interviewing for a position, is it out of line to say like, hey, just want to, understand one, my career growth path here, but two, what does like the hiring roadmap look like? I'd love to know like how we envision this engineering or product teams like forming out, to kind of get a little bit of a cue of where and when this might actually happen, to you when you're joining something, a startup. Organically, it's going to be growing. So of course there's going to be folks brought in, but where do I fall into that? So let's chat about it from the perspective of the person that is getting layered.
Oh, that's you can come at that one from so many angles.
Yeah,
because it's like it's having people come in, but me, it can be like deeply emotional. Just like, hey, why is this person coming in? Where am I not meeting the needs of the company? But I think having that the expectations of what's needed more than just, hey, we're bringing someone in, can really like set the tone of like, yeah, this is the role. This is what's we need from the role. And if looking at that, it's like, yeah, I am not qualified for that role.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And getting kind of buy-in that, okay, there is a need from others that there's something missing.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to find like a startup that, maybe because I worked in smaller startups, so the idea of like career growth is like, yeah, we'll get to it. The small to mid-sized companies, I at least expect them to say in the future we will plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't really seen it from like a startup, maybe a startup that's like on funding round like 8. You know, as you get into the later letters, that you can actually see it happening. Most of the time, the companies I worked on have just been working on product, just trying to get product market fit. I will say this, that it's important. Like when I bring it up, I'm going to say, if I'm going to stay here for 2-3 years, like if I'm going to stay here long enough to vest my stock, then we need to be having that conversation about career growth. And I'm pretty upfront. I'm saying my expectation that is in a year I should have a team. And it's kind of like not like a warning. I'm not trying to like threaten anybody, but more just like I'm letting you know this is what I expect out of you as my manager and my C-level folk, my my leadership. That in a year I should be able to have grown my career, because I'm great. I'm all for like bringing a product to market, but at the end of the day, I still got to get paid.
Yeah, and I think that aligns pretty much with like my experience as well, which is small company. Usually the conversation is sort of like, well, we're going to need everything, and we're like, all these opportunities are here for you to grow into if it makes sense. Like there's not going to be a promise. There's not going to be a whatever. There's just this like, yeah, obviously if we're successful, we're going to grow. We're going to want to, I think questions around like coming into a company, questions around promoting from within and people's theories on that, like asking those types of probative questions to sort of get a sense of, is there an actual opportunity for me to grow here? Or as we get more and more successful, are they just going to keep hiring more and more layers above me? I think you can sort of get a sense for that during the interview process. But my experience has been, right, most startups, right, to Kim's point, like they don't really know that it's like, hopefully we're that successful. Like we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Like first let's get some code out the door.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I just actually had a conversation with a new CS comp sci grad. It was a friend of a friend. I offer mentoring services just to anybody that asks for it. And
awesome.
We were talking about it, and I was like, so what kind of company are you targeting? And she was pretty smart. She was like, well, I don't want to go into startups. And I was like, well, why not? She says, because I wouldn't have the mentorship that I need to really, have a strong foundation for building my career at a startup. And I was like, why would you think that? She's like, and she asked me, she point blank was like, well, would you do that as a beginning dev? Would you start at a startup? And I was like, that's a really good point. And most of the time, at least the startups that I've been at have always been like, we need senior ICs because we're trying to build this thing and we need to get there as quick as possible. That being said, I was actually telling my partner this. I was like, I feel like in the past year, I've really understood how important it is picking the right size startup when it comes to getting into people management. Because I've been in those companies where it's like you just like it was just said, you're like, hey, I offer all these wonderful services of like people management. I can get your teams going, and they're like, that's cool, but we actually need an air conditioner. Like we need an HVAC person, and you're like, oh, okay, well, just hit me up in like 2 years.
Right.
I'll gladly do it. And it sucks, but it's like dating. You got to find the right fit, right?
Yeah, right. I love that point you made, Mike, about just what's your philosophy on like promoting from within? Because, I think there's something to be said about that. Like, we think about that at Hatch a lot of, we want to build this next layer of leaders. And for the most part, everybody's really been pretty, heads down, hands on, tackling different challenges. Like people management has been something that predominantly for the first, call it up to 15-ish, it's been myself and my business partner, and trying to put that next layer within is something that we had to have this conversation of, is the goal to go out and find this VP that is just going to then step in and be the person. How would that come across to these folks that have been loyal, been here for 4 years or so, and then communicating to them like, no, we want you to be that lead. If you want to be that person, we can set you up for that path. And that's our philosophy, and that's how we communicate it. And I will say that you don't ever want to just like commit to that's the only way it's going to be, because there could very well be a scenario where if the business is suffering because we don't have this expertise in place, we're going to need to hire it from outside at some point. So trying to find a happy medium there. But I like from a candidate's perspective of like probing that question a little bit of what historically have you seen a lot of your folks like go into internal promotions, and can you give me some examples? I think that's a really interesting point.
I think Sean said something earlier also that's where the sort of talking to people about what the expectations are. Like, why are we going outside? Why aren't we promoting from within? Like, what is it? It might not be anything personal. And in fact, actually, I think from a leadership perspective, I think there's sometimes like some hesitancy to have that conversation, but frequently people are pretty self-aware, or they can be. And if you sort of explain like, well, this is what we're like, does this job sound like a job you want to do? And it's like, oh no, hell no. Like, yeah, please hire that person. Right. I don't want to sit in meetings all day and go to the board and have to deal with budgets and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like, no, that's not the job. I thought the job was something completely different. Yeah, no, hire that person.
No, that's exactly. I've done that recently. It's just like talk with lead engineers and like, do we want to go into a management track? Or is this something you're interested in? Like, I need a people manager because I can't have 27 people report to me. This is what the role entails. Do people want to get in that? And they're like, no, I want to be like hands-on keyboard, incredible dev, and have a long running career that's going to go through the roof on an IC route. It's like, great, let's try to foster that. But we need someone in this role to help you do that.
Right. Or to help me help you.
Right? Help me help you. Sure.
Yeah. I think about like trying to convince like a senior IC to like move into another layer, and it's like trying to pull a burro to water. Like it's like some people are just like, you can convince there's a little light, and others are like, hell to the nah, to the nah.
I think it's interesting is there's people who the most senior engineers generally already know, now that's not what I want. It's it's just a couple layers below, or a couple of years of experience below that, where they think that's what they want. And then you start talking to them about what the job really is, and they're like, oh, that's not the job I thought it was. But I remember the first time I was promoted to manager, and my team lead came in and she's like, I have children older than you. And she's like, I used to think I wanted to sit in that seat. I sat in that seat for like a month and hated it. And then, blah, 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 and had that conversation. It was a really healthy conversation, because I do think that a lot of people assume that the only way to move up in an organization is through management. And they don't know about like the sort of staff engineer and the senior, IC type route and staying technical. Yeah. So
that's one of the biggest things, is making sure that people can see that route and then giving them a taste of what some management may be. Like, we're leading a project, like not managing anybody yet. And like, but effectively, you're doing like 90% of the people management on this project. Get a taste of it, get a taste of it again. And then just like, what did you like? What did you not? Do some like retrospectives in a one-on-one on that to see what it is that they're really getting out of that role. And is it like, oh, I just love solving this like deep architectural problem. That's awesome. And like, well, what about this side? Like, oh yeah, we kind of like didn't really pay attention. So doubling down on that tech side is super helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think good leaders should have a pulse on what their team wants. This is going to come by way of, your one-on-ones. If those are weekly, monthly, what have you, there should be an ongoing communication that's happening here, but between, hey, are you satisfied here? What are the things that you want to get more exposure to, or what are the things we might want to dial back if we're putting too much on your plate? That should kind of set the stage for, I've talked to 6 of my senior folks, and not a single person has communicated that people management is of interest. This is a good cue, right? Like maybe we need to start looking outside for this next person. So good leaders will have that, should have that pulse. But it definitely gets tricky the larger you get, right? Because there's going to be that many more layers of folks that need to kind of communicate that up the flagpole. So I think we talked a little bit about this, Ken, but like when we were doing a discovery session.
I don't remember any of this. What are you talking about? I didn't say anything.
We've got you on the record. Got you on the record. So you get layered, and let's just say it was a really poor scenario, the way it played out. How do you tactfully go, like, move forward from there? Like, what are some of those? What are some of your options?
I mean, I'm going to be very, very careful how I say this. I usually just leave. I mean, I know maybe some listeners probably be like, that sounds redonkulous. Like, why would you do that? I think what it is that if, for example, we're moving layers, right? Like, well, I see you moving in this part. I'm very clear with my managers and very clear with folks I report up to. Like one of the first one-on-one is like, here is my plan. Here is what I want to do within a year. I want to be able to look back and say, I accomplished this. It's not just 30, 60, 90. This is where I see Kim Merino heading. And I hope that is what you see from me. I learned in this industry from a really great mentor of mine, Frankie Nicoletti, who has, been on the show. She made it very clear. She's like, you should really be very honest and transparent with the person who was just layered above you, because you want to establish trust and transparency and to be as honest as possible. So I always let my managers know at the beginning, this is what I want. And we have an honest discussion if they see that's where they see me and where I can fit into this layered cake. And I'm pretty honest. Like, if I see that we're not, when I hate saying this word, aligned, I am very willing to say, you know what? I don't think I have a place here. I would much rather, I don't want to waste your time because it's very expensive. My time is very expensive, and the team has things that they need to do. And there's a product that needs to get out there. There's people who have put a lot of money in investing into making sure that they actually get a return. So let's just call it even and let's part our ways. That's been my philosophy, because I know I'm in demand. I can go somewhere else. I mean, recruiters are hitting me up on Twitter. Like, come on. If, for example, there's a company that I'm like, I really want to stay, I usually just wait until I hear the option and I ask myself, like, can I possibly do this for 90 days to set somebody else up for success? And as opposed to like, I'm going to try to fit myself into this little box of like, oh, I'm going to go into like product management or project management, or I'm going to go back into a senior IC role. I say to myself, let me just give it 90 days so that I can make sure that the next person who they're going to hire has like a whole set, like a whole skeleton that they can work with, and they can be successful. And my team that I used to have will be successful as well.
Yeah, well said. I think I would say that well, one, hopefully it's not our recruiters that are hitting you up on Twitter.
No, we good.
I would say that the point about, there's no use in wasting too much of any person's time once it's kind of been decided. And I think the idea of helping transition somebody in is a kind gesture, but at the same time, it's like, I guess it's very circumstantial, right? It is. How much time has been invested into you by the company and vice versa. Like, obviously the tenure and the relationships that have been built, like all of that will play a part into how that transition plays out. But I would just say, like, from a startup's perspective, I play this out in my company. I would say, well, let's find the person that's the better fit for what we need right now, and just go our separate ways.
I much prefer to just go passive aggressive and undermine that person as much as possible.
I love that.
You said that with some conviction. I'm sure maybe there's some sort of a story that you might want to tell at some point.
No, not at all.
Sean, what about yourself? Anything on that topic that you?
I found that a lot of times in startups, people can get like, they really actually want to see the startup succeed. So I've found that as people are leaving, and like I've done that myself, like when I know I'm leaving, trying to set the company up for success. Yes, like the decision's made, we're going to leave quickly, it's going to happen, but what's actually that right time? Because a lot of times people are like, I love the team here. It's like, I love them where things are going. It's just not right for me right now. And we have that great common understanding. So how can we help? Like, I'd love to help support people outside, like help them find their next role, set the team up so that the rest of the org can move without them.
I agree with that. I think back a couple jobs, the CEO there really hammered this on a lot of occasions as we grew. When I joined, there were 6 people, so I was like employee 7 or 8, something like that. The idea of like just leave a place better than the way you found it. And every time we brought in somebody else, and there were a few times, and I forgot actually, that the person who hired me ended up, I don't know if he ended up reporting to me or if he ended up reporting to somebody else that he had hired, but whatever. There was all this there was this constant like moving around at a certain layer at a certain phase when we were about 20 so people. But that idea of like when somebody was leaving, they're like, hey, the CEO was really like, hey, this person did a great job. They're leaving it better than the way they found it. They're really setting the next person up for success. And I think that's always my goal whenever I leave an organization is it better off that I had been there?
Wait, as opposed to following the rule in the national parks, leave no trace. Leave a company as if you were never there.
That's funny.
I actually love that though. Like if I know I'm going to be leaving, can I just like ghost out of the organization and have everything keep going? Like if that can happen, it's like success.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think that's not bad. I don't think that's a bad measure of success either. Of like, but the leave no trace ghosting.
Get your shit out of here. Like get gone.
Actually, just stop showing up and see if they keep paying you and for how long.
Well, that's when you need the direct deposit teed up.
While you're in Spain,
eating cheese. Oh man.
So we got a few minutes left. I do want to take it from the perspective of the new person coming into the company, because there can be a little hostility maybe, or just a little like awkwardness for the first week, month, or whatever it might be. So what would you recommend to somebody that's coming into the org that's just trying to figure out their place?
Especially when your manager was overlooked for that position and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Some drama.
I mean, maybe because I'm in LA, I love like petty drama like that, but I'm just,
like a reality TV show.
Reality TV, I'm just like, ooh, it's going to get good. I can't wait for the on-site. Ooh, I hope they come to blows, I think that what I would do is, especially when there's drama like that, and some people would be like, "Oh, you're not your alliances." I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that. That's middle school stuff. That's stuff. I'm not a kid. I usually just try to make myself available to like the new person, especially if they're like in a leadership position. I do it strategically. I say, if you need to know what our rituals, what our processes are, I'm probably going to be the person you can ask. Because it actually sets myself up for success with the new person. Mm-hmm. They know to go to me. It's sort of like I'm already like working my way towards a certain position I might want. I've done that before where I've like leveraged my way so that I could say to this new person, say like, hey, I'm the person in charge of X, Y, and Z so far. I'm willing to change it, but here's what I know and here's the strengths of this team. And actually, it will set me up for like my next role, and it's made me very, very happy. It's, if anything, it shows the new VP, the new CEO, whatever. I'm here to help you be successful. And actually, the other thing I like to do, especially if they're coming in an engineering org as opposed to like marketing, I always try to put the new person through the orientation that all engineers go through, so that they can know the product. And like, I actually will have a conversation with them like our first day and say like, so what are your goals for like the next 90 days? And they're like, excuse me? I'm like, well, you're onboarding as an engineer first. because you need to understand the product. So I'm just going to walk you through this process. It's always this thing where like someone comes from like a big company, you know, they're used to being in charge, and here I'm going, so were you able to get your local dev environment set up? They're like, oh yeah, you know, it's been super successful because it ramps them up and they can understand the pain points that my team will go through. And then they'll be like, hey, Kim, can you help me out with this problem? I'll be like, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Sean, what about yourself? Anything that you recommend for that new person coming in that's, you know, how they want to address like the team that they're going to be running?
Yeah. So like Kim brought up a good point around like, these are the pain points. You get to know those pain points. But one thing that I've encountered, and probably because I've made this mistake, is going through the like an interview process coming in to be a layer. Like, this is how I see things could change. This is how I see we could make a difference. And then when actually taking on that role, you don't know jack, honestly. And like being able to be upfront about that and talk with the engineers, talk with the team, because they are going to know so much more about what needs to be done than you do. And it starts building up the communication, which is necessary to build those relationships and then find those pain points and find the direction and have them actually start leading that. Because if you're like, oh, yep, this is the problem, this is how you fix it, it's going to be wrong. Let's be honest. Right. It's going to be wrong.
Yeah, I think you should be spending, like, to your point, like, I think you should be spending probably the first 30 days just listening. Like, when I came in, took over an engineering team, that's, you know, it was like, just let them talk. Let them tell you what the problems are. Don't, you know, if there's some obvious things that you can do to help, like, obviously do that. But for the most part, you want to listen. You want to, I agree. Like,
listen.
Right.
Listen and coach. And like, if they have questions like, oh, here's something I've seen, maybe you could explore that and really continue to empower as much as possible.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. I get a lot of like, I get a lot of visuals of The Office with like Dwight and Andy competing for the assistant to the assistant manager. No, I'm the assistant to the assistant manager. It's pretty comical. Cool. Well, I think any last talking points before we transition to the next segment? Covered quite a bit, so cool. Let's jump in. So this next segment is called Round Out My Career. It's a fun segment where we spin this community wheel that's behind me. It's got topics and questions that are crowdsourced from the Hatchpad community, and they can, you know, range from anything from compensation to diversity. Let's give it a spin and see what today's topic will be.
Let's round it out.
My Pat Sajak impersonation here. Oh shit! It's actually the giveaway. Mike, tell them what they've won.
Raspberry Pi.
So Kim's excited. She's like, am I getting that? No, it's actually
wait, I thought you were talking about an actual pie. I'm like, you talking about food? I was like,
confused.
Hell
Is this
yeah.
a cake? Are we talking layers? How do you layer
How do you layer cake? Yeah, right. Ice cream on top.
So not the actual dessert, but Raspberry Pi, the tech. We will be passing that off to somebody randomly within the Hatchback community. We'll draw that next week and make that announcement at some point in the next few weeks. So that's the first time that's happened in some time. So you all are good luck. Let's just pick a random question. Then I kind of like the compensation bucket right now because it is very top of mind and a very
speaking of direct deposits.
Yay!
So I want to take this question, but maybe do it from the perspective of like a leader, a manager who's trying to hire. So, you know, obviously getting into a negotiation over comp, it's going to happen at some point. Any tips, I guess, from, you know, how you would handle it from the technical leader side, trying to negotiate with an engineer coming in. They're obviously going to have their stance on things, but how can you go about this tactfully when you're trying to make this work? Sean, you've done a bit of hiring. How does this work for you?
I think a couple of the things that have worked is knowing which levers we can pull. Like, what does someone actually really want? Is salary going to be something that drives someone? Is equity going to be something that drives one? And knowing that there's a few different options to try to help make things work. Also knowing, depending on where your company is, like what is actually feasible. And understanding the value of the role. I mean, I've had engineers come in like, this is my comp. I'm like, great, I'm going to give you more. Because like that is really like what this role would be driving. And I think those are the biggest things because really we're trying to reach a mutual agreement here. We're not trying to win and trying to find other ways to help out. Like, oh, maybe we can come up with a bonus program, something to make it work. Get a little creative.
Mm-hmm. Kim, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this topic. Let's get your spicy take.
My spicy take I mean, for me, it's not equity in terms of stock, but equity with the salaries. I'm usually the person on the team that when they're like, oh, it's, they'll be like, oh, it's a male, candidate, we're going to pay this. I go, what are we paying the other female engineer in this role? Is it the same? And they'll be like, oh no, this person's going to get more because of market. I go, then we should make sure that person is also getting a raise too. So we should include that in the offer that we're giving this person in terms of budgeting. One thing this is of course pre-Panini. I remember having to negotiate work from home. That was a big thing prior to the pandemic. And I remember having to tell the CEO, like, listen, you're getting a really good data engineer. I know them personally, and the one thing like you don't want to negotiate on is them being able to work, on a hybrid schedule. That was probably the most difficult thing. It wasn't anything with the candidate, and it's I think like as a beginning EM, I always thought like the hardest part was going to be negotiating with the candidate. The thing is, the candidates know what they want. They're like, I want X number, I want this much equity, I want this bonus, or I want this title. It's always the company. It's always the C-level people who were like, oh no, that's not what I had in mind. I don't know what I want. Well, and maybe they could, like, for example, this data engineer, they didn't know, oh, well, I don't know. I think I want them in the office. And I'm like, you needed to find this before, because these are going to be some curveballs people are going to throw at you. What if I were to come to you and say, here's this great candidate, they're going to come under budget, but they need 3 weeks off, right away. Is that going to be a make or break? And that, for me, I then end up going back and redefining this with my team to say, like, before we start searching for someone, let's plan. Let's plan about, like, if we have scenario A where they want to work, hybrid, or they want, 5% more than what we can possibly offer them. What are we going to do? And that's where I actually have those conversations with our recruitment team, our HR, which I don't think a lot of EM folks do, aside from like, here's the candidate, please go ahead and talk to them. I actually will start a planning session about, like, what about we have these curveballs? What can I work with? Has this been defined yet? Does the CEO know what he wants in terms of, like, work from home or whatnot?
Right.
That's funny, because that you say about having the HR team and having them negotiate. I don't like having them negotiate, because I don't think that they can negotiate the way I can. Like, look, during the interview, the part of my interview process, and frequently, like, the fact is, at startups, you need people from here to here, like the width of the role. Like, you could hire this person if I can get this person for this salary, and they can fit this, and they can do 80% of what I want, and I'm going to pay, whatever. Like, sometimes you just have a big wide range of what you're looking for. And so for me, my interview process is figuring out, like, where are they in that range? Like, are they senior? What should their title be? Blah, blah, blah. And so when we get to the end, frequently we're within pretty close range on compensation. And it's usually, to Sean's point, sometimes it's like, they're like, oh, you're going to pay me more than I wanted. And it's like, yeah, that's what we pay. Like, my general philosophy to your point, Kim, is like, I want to be able to print out everybody's salary and put it in the kitchen, and everybody look at it and be like, yeah, that makes sense. And and I know that we can't do that because people are sensitive about that stuff, but that's my philosophy. So
Mm-hmm.
with that in mind, the hardest part is when there's an expectation gap between where you think the person is. Maybe they want $10,000 more or a slightly different title, or maybe it's 15,000 or whatever it is. They have bigger expectations than where you thought you saw them coming in which case I usually have a pretty candid conversation. It's like, cool. If I really think you're capable of doing this and you think you're capable of doing this, let me explain to you what's going to happen. I'll do that. And I'm going to have higher expectations on you. And this is what I'm going to expect. And if you don't think that you can live up to these expectations, we're probably going to have a very uncomfortable conversation in the next 90 days. But if you think that that's what you're worth, and and what I found is most people are pretty self-aware, and they're like, yeah, I'm sorry that I interviewed poorly and you thought that I'm here, but I'm here. And then they come in and you're like, holy shit, how did we get it so wrong during the interview process? And they're great. In other cases, yeah, they overinflated themselves, and you're going to have an uncomfortable conversation. But in general, I've yet to be in that situation where I've had that candid conversation with someone and said, look, that's cool, but these are my expectations. They haven't let me down. Now, there's been times where I've been like, I can't afford that. I get that that's where you are. I get that's what you're at. And the fact is, I can't, we just can't make that work. That's a totally different thing. But yeah.
Yeah, a couple things on that. So one, obviously we run a recruiting company, so we're constantly in the trenches of having these conversations, not just with candidates, but coaching our customers and the hiring managers. Because I think one of the things that we see too is, one, if your recruiting team isn't really getting that information from the start up front, you're just going to waste a lot of people's time through the process. Yep. So that needs to be communicated early on to make sure that final stage, that final process, that person already knows, from the first couple of days of this candidate in interviewing, okay, this is what this individual is looking for. Is it even feasible? Because some of the requests right now are just outlandish. But beyond that, you made a good point, Kim, because I think it's important to have that communication between the recruiters and the technical leaders, because there needs to be this understanding of what the market's doing, and it's happening very fast. And so the VP of engineering might not be so privy to the fact that, just in the last few months, we're seeing this type of an uptick, and it's happening every single day. We're getting these kind of responses. They're not maybe tuned into that as much as the recruiter is, because they're getting that true market feedback constantly. So I think that back and forth communication. But then as far as trying to think of creative ways to negotiate beyond just the comp, I think it plays into this conversation that we're talking about today. It's what is the growth potential here? Because, if you want to think about, hiring for a long-term role, paint the picture for the person and get them excited. And if you can't do that, then there's probably not a good chance that this person's going to be there long-term. It'll just be more of a, what's my immediate comp? And then, that's what I care about, versus the promotion track that we've got, forecasted for your specific role comes with some very aggressive comp increases, or this type of a bump in a year or two, just so they have something that they can realistically look forward to. I think that's something that, especially in startup world, right, where it's there's clearly opportunity for advancement here. You just need to understand it going in, so that you're not just going in for this role today. You're going in for the role that you're going to be here for the next 3 to 5 years.
And I wanted to clarify something. I think there's a big difference between the in-house recruiters negotiate and the external. When I work with an external agency, I want to work with the external agency. I want them to have that conversation. They're going to be able to be a good middleman in a way, or a middle person in a way that I can't. And so it's a very different thing when it's, what I don't want is for someone who's working with, going to work for me, have so much of their initial impression of the company based on their experience with someone else that's already at the company, which might, I prefer them to have that with me. Now, if it's an external recruiter, that this is what they do day in and day out, happy to leverage that. And I think that's an important thing. And that's one of the advantages of using a firm or an agency.
And hopefully they can identify all those curveballs early. So it could be those total things that are not comp related. And all right, let's talk about that before we go through an interview process.
I mean, that's right. That's the whole point of it. If an agency is giving me candidates that I can't use, then why am I using this agency? I think that's,
exactly.
you know what I mean? So
But I even look at
you got a bigger problem there.
Exactly.
Yeah. I even look at that with like internal recruitment. It's just like, we're trying to find these curveballs early and have that conversation early. Say like, okay, this is what the person's expecting. Oh, they have this scenario that they want to play out. And being able to address that, and also in the early stages, like working in like a mission-based organization, like the mission and actually what we're trying to do outside of salary brings some of its own compensation. Right. So like it gets down to like, honestly, if we're looking at candidates that like, oh, I need this, and we're talking salary at the beginning, it's like maybe this isn't actually the right fit for you, because like we are very mission driven, and that is part of the compensation of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because a lot of like some of the mission driven companies, you can almost kind of correlate like a nonprofit maybe, right? They actually are the ones that maybe don't have as much funding or the money to pay the robust salary, but your task as a recruiter is to drive in and dial in on the folks that have something in their background that's going to, they've worked health tech in the past, and they clearly like understand, or they love music, and they think that this music tech, company is going to be, a place where they just really get behind the subject matter. You have to drive that home with the recruiting team, because, otherwise they're just going to be picking and choosing anybody. And that's when comp really becomes a little out of control.
When you're just hiring mercenaries. Yeah.
It's cutthroat out there. I'll tell you what, though, we've got an episode coming up that's all about compensation. So I'm pretty jazzed about it. It should be a pretty juicy discussion. But aside from that, this has been a really good one. I as I was sourcing for speakers for this episode, I had a couple of messages from, some product management folks who were telling me straight up, like, this is happening to me in real time. I'm really excited to hear what folks have to say about this getting layered concept. So I'm really happy that we were able to address it. I think it'll be helpful for a lot of our listeners. And I just want to thank you all so much for spending time with us. Is there any more specific on social that you want to shout out where, our guests can find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at Lady Cornfish. On Twitter, it's a mix of tech and sports.
Go UCLA.
Yeah, UCLA Dodgers. Don't talk about my Lakers. And then TikTok, and I'll just also like the intersectionality of being a woman, being queer, being Latinx. Same thing on TikTok. It's mostly queer focus and tech. But yeah, come see some cute chihuahuas and me gripe about the Lakers and cheer on UCLA.
That's awesome. Sean, what about yourself?
Oh, you'll find me almost nowhere.
No trace. Leave no trace.
I'm just going to ghost after this episode, if that's cool. You can find me on LinkedIn, Sean McBride.
Cool. On that note, we'll leave no trace. We'll get the hell out of here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.